The most dangerous mistake I see in people over 50 is not a stroke, not a fall, not even high sugar. It is this quiet thought: I'm just getting older, of course my memory is getting worse. No, not always. Sometimes the brain is not fading because of age alone. Sometimes it is being dulled, day after day, tablet after tablet, by medicines that seem ordinary, familiar, even harmless. A sleep pill taken just for a while. An allergy capsule bought without a prescription. A bladder medicine prescribed with good intentions. A calming tablet that was supposed to help through a difficult season and then stayed for years. And a person who was clear, attentive, lively 6 months ago suddenly begins to lose words, misplace things, repeat questions, look tired in the eyes, and frighten the whole family. That is why I want you to stay with me to the very end, because the most important point is the one many people never hear from anyone, and it is often the very reason memory begins to collapse faster than it should. I want you to think of one ordinary evening. The kettle is boiling, the television is on, the glasses are somewhere nearby, but again, they cannot be found. You walk into the kitchen and for a second you do not remember why. Then you laugh it off, because everyone forgets something now and then. Of course they do. But what worries me is not one forgotten spoon or one missed word. What worries me is the slow change in the whole texture of life. When a person becomes less steady, less focused, less emotionally resilient, when the mind no longer feels fresh in the morning, when names slip away faster, when there is a strange fog after lunch, when sleep becomes heavier, but rest becomes poorer, when loved ones begin saying, "You already told me that." These are the moments that deserve honesty, not excuses. In mature age, the brain becomes more sensitive, not weaker in character but more vulnerable in chemistry. A younger body often forgives what an older one cannot. The liver clears medicines more slowly. The kidneys remove them less efficiently. The brain itself reacts more sharply to substances that calm, dry, sedate, or block signals between nerve cells. This is not theory from a dusty textbook. Geriatric medicine has been warning for years that certain drugs with so-called anticholinergic effects can cause confusion, memory problems, and worsening thinking in older adults, and the American Geriatric Society specifically notes that cumulative exposure to these medicines is associated with delirium and dementia risk in older people. Research has also found that heavy long-term use of strong anticholinergic drugs was linked with a higher risk of developing dementia later on. Now listen carefully to the difference, because this is where families get confused. There is dementia, which develops over time, and there is drug-related cognitive decline, which can look frighteningly similar at the beginning. A person becomes slower, more forgetful, more confused, more sleepy, less confident. They may stop reading because the line of thought slips away. They may stop going out because the world feels too noisy. They may stop cooking not because they are lazy, but because the sequence is no longer easy to hold in the mind. And sometimes everyone around them assumes the worst immediately. Yet in real practice, when medicines are reviewed properly, some of this decline can improve. Not always fully, not in every case, but often enough that it should never be ignored. That is why I become very strict when I hear someone say, "It's only a small pill." There is no such thing as a small pill for the brain when the brain is already under pressure from age, poor sleep, stress, pain, loneliness, blood pressure swings, or diabetes. Years ago, I saw a man in his late 60s who came with his daughter. She was certain her father had developed rapid dementia. He had become scattered, irritable, forgetful, unsteady, and strangely indifferent to things he used to care about. He had even begun to lose the thread of simple conversations. But when we laid out every medicine on the table, not the official list from memory, but the actual boxes from the house, the picture changed. There was a sleep aid used almost every night. There was an older allergy medicine. There was a nerve tablet from a previous doctor. There was something for dizziness taken as needed, which in reality meant almost daily. None of those boxes looked dramatic on their own. Together they were like a heavy blanket thrown over the brain. When the treatment was reviewed carefully and adjusted safely, the daughter later told me, "It feels like part of my father came back." I remember that sentence very clearly. It was not magic. It was not a miracle. It was medicine used more wisely. And this is exactly why this subject matters now, not someday, not after another year of watching and waiting. The mature brain does not like chemical clutter. It needs clean signals. It needs blood flow, sleep that restores rather than stuns, movement, conversation, and medicines that solve more problems than they create. What makes this especially dangerous is that the first signs are easy to dismiss. People blame retirement, weather, grief, poor mood, lack of vitamins, anything except the medicine cabinet. Yet even the National Institute on Aging warns that multiple drugs affecting the brain can worsen memory and thinking, especially in older adults. That is not a rare curiosity. That is everyday clinical reality. There is another uncomfortable truth. Some of the medicines that cloud the mind are not exotic at all. They are popular precisely because they work quickly. They help you sleep tonight. They dry the nose tonight. They calm the nerves tonight. They stop urgency in the bladder tonight. They reduce agitation tonight. And because they seem to help in the moment, people stay with them much longer than the brain can comfortably afford. Relief in one area may quietly steal clarity in another. This trade becomes more expensive with every passing year. That is why a prescription should never be judged only by whether it reduces one symptom. It must also be judged by what it costs the mind, the balance, the reaction time, the independence, the confidence to drive, the ability to follow a conversation, the spark in the eyes. I want to ask you something very simply and very directly. Have you noticed that your memory is not exactly failing all at once, but becoming uneven? One day, almost normal. Another day, as if someone dimmed the light. Have you noticed more dryness in the mouth, more constipation, more daytime sleepiness, more hesitation in speech, more uncertainty on stairs, more trouble finding the right word, more dependence on notes, more irritation from noise? These details matter. In medicine, small signs often speak before large disasters arrive. The body whispers for a long time before it cries out. So do one calm, practical thing tomorrow. Gather every medicine you take in a week: prescription drugs, over-the-counter pills, allergy tablets, sleep aids, motion sickness tablets, pain relievers, something for nerves, herbal calming drops, everything. Put them in one place and look at them honestly. Not with fear and not with shame, simply with adult seriousness, because the first protection against memory decline is not panic. It is clarity. It is knowing what is entering your body and what may be quietly leaning on your brain. And stay close, because in a moment I will begin with one of the most underestimated groups of medicines in older age, the kind people often keep in a handbag, a bedside drawer, or a coat pocket without suspecting that the path from harmless relief to real mental fog can be much shorter than they ever imagined. If this matters to you, subscribe and like this video now, so this information reaches more people before another family mistakes a medicine problem for just old age. And this is where people are often sincerely surprised, because the first group I want you to think about does not look dangerous at all. It often lives in the home as something almost ordinary, something for sleep, for itching, for a runny nose, for nausea, for just calming down a little. I am speaking about medicines with a strong drying and sedating effect on the brain, the ones that block an important chemical signal called acetylcholine. You do not need to remember the term itself. What matters is the meaning. This signal helps the brain keep attention, form memory, stay mentally flexible, and maintain clear communication between nerve cells. When that signal is blocked too often, especially after 50 and even more after 65, the mind begins to behave as if it is walking through thick fog. That is why an older person may say, "I sleep after this pill, so it helps me," while the family notices something else entirely. The person wakes heavier, slower, a little dulled. They may not call it confusion. They may simply say, "I don't feel like myself in the morning." This sentence, by the way, should always make you pause. The body is often more accurate than medical paperwork. When a patient says, "I do sleep, but I no longer feel fresh," I pay attention, because real restorative sleep and chemical sedation are not the same thing. Sedation can knock down consciousness without giving the brain the deep, organized recovery it needs. In practical life, this means a person may technically sleep 8 hours and still behave during the day like someone who rested poorly. The most common examples here are older antihistamines and sleep aids. People know them by habit, by brand names, by family advice, by the phrase, "Take this, it always helped me." Diphenhydramine is one classic example. Many know it from allergy products or nighttime sleep medicines. Some combination cold remedies also contain substances of the same type. They can make a person sleepy, yes, but in older adults they can also dry the mouth, worsen constipation, blur vision, increase urinary problems, slow reaction, and most importantly here, cloud thinking. The brain, in later life, is less forgiving of these effects. A 40-year-old may feel sluggish after such a medicine and recover by noon. A 70-year-old may carry that fog through the next day, then repeat the dose again at night, then begin living inside that state without realizing it. I remember a woman who had become convinced that her memory was failing rapidly. She was elegant, disciplined, sharp by nature, and this frightened her deeply. She kept a tidy notebook because she no longer trusted herself to remember phone calls, appointments, or even simple errands. Her children were whispering about dementia. She was ashamed and tried to hide how much she was forgetting. During the medication review, it turned out she had been taking an over-the-counter nighttime product for months. It had started after a stressful winter when sleep became shallow. At first it seemed like a blessing. Then the days became heavier. She began losing words. She once put milk into a cupboard and cereal into the refrigerator. These are the kinds of moments that terrify families. But when the medicine was changed safely, when sleep was approached more intelligently, with timing of light, gentler strategies, and proper supervision, her thinking improved noticeably. Not because age reversed, of course not, but because one steady source of mental burden was removed. There is a scientific reason this matters so much. The areas of the brain involved in memory rely heavily on clean chemical signaling. If you repeatedly interfere with those signals, the effect is not always dramatic in one day. More often, it is cumulative. Like dust settling on a piano, not enough to silence it at first, but enough over time to change the sound. And here lies the danger for mature people. What begins as a small compromise can become the new normal. A person stops expecting clarity. They lower their standards. They begin saying, "Well, at my age," and the medicine escapes suspicion entirely. I am strict about this because I have heard too many stories that begin with good intentions. A widower cannot sleep after losing his wife and starts taking a nighttime tablet every evening. A retired teacher develops spring allergies and uses an older antihistamine because it is cheap and familiar. A man with occasional dizziness begins relying on a sedating pill before car rides. None of them are trying to harm themselves, they are trying to cope. But the older body keeps a careful accounting. What calms one symptom can quietly damage confidence, memory, stability, and independence. It is not only about dementia as a diagnosis in the future, it is about the daily erosion of the mind now. There is also something families often miss. Medicines of this kind can change mood as well as memory. A person may become more irritable, more withdrawn, less patient, less emotionally resilient. They may avoid long conversations not because they do not care, but because thinking feels like dragging a heavy suitcase uphill. They may stop reading because the thread of the page breaks. They may stop enjoying social visits because too many voices feel exhausting. In mature age, these changes are too quickly blamed on character. He has become difficult. She has become lazy. Very often, that is unfair. Sometimes the brain is chemically burdened and the personality gets blamed for it. The body leaves clues. Dry mouth that makes a person keep sipping water, constipation that did not exist before, eyes that feel gritty, a little more trouble emptying the bladder, daytime sleepiness that no coffee truly fixes, a strange, disconnected feeling in the morning. More stumbles, more hesitation before simple tasks. These details may seem unrelated, but together they form a pattern I have learned to respect. Medicine rarely shouts first. It usually whispers in several directions at once. What should you do with this information tomorrow? Very practically. Do not stop anything abruptly on your own, especially if it has been taken for a long time. That would be careless. Instead, look at every sleep aid, allergy tablet, cold medicine, dizziness tablet, motion sickness pill, or PM product in the house. Read the active ingredients. If you see an older sedating substance, that is already a reason for a calm conversation with your doctor or pharmacist. Ask a simple, mature question. Is this safe for my memory and balance at my age? That question alone can change a great deal. It is direct, intelligent, and often long overdue. Then give yourself one small experiment for the next 7 days, but only safely and with common sense. Keep a notebook by the bed, and in the morning write 3 things. How clear is my head today? How steady do I feel when I stand up? How easy is it for me to find words in the first conversation of the day? These are not abstract observations. They are daily markers of how the brain is coping. A mature person should trust patterns, not excuses. And as this becomes clearer, another layer usually appears right behind it, because many people who take sedating or drying medicines also take another common category that can press on the brain from a different angle entirely. This next one is especially deceptive because it is often prescribed by a doctor, taken for months or years, and accepted as normal, even while the person slowly becomes less sharp, less steady, and less fully present in their own life. And that second layer is often even more dangerous precisely because it comes with an air of legitimacy. A person says, "But this was prescribed to me." Of course it was. Many medicines are prescribed with good intentions. The question is not whether the intention was good. The question is whether the medicine still serves you safely today, at your present age, with your present brain, your present kidneys, your present sleep, your present balance, and your present list of other tablets. What helped at 50 can become a burden at 68. What was reasonable for a short crisis can become harmful when it quietly turns into a permanent habit. Here, I want you to pay very close attention to calming medicines and sleeping medicines from the benzodiazepine family and related drugs. These are the tablets many people know as something for nerves, for anxiety, for panic, for sleep, for a difficult season, for grief, for restlessness, for switching the brain off at night. They work. That is exactly why people get attached to them. A medicine that eases panic or brings on sleep within minutes feels powerful, almost merciful. A person who has been lying awake with a racing mind feels rescued by it. Someone trembling from anxiety feels normal again. I understand that. I have seen suffering, and I do not speak about these medicines with contempt. I speak about them with respect because powerful help can become powerful harm when it stays too long. In later life, these medicines can slow the brain, weaken the formation of new memories, dull attention, reduce reaction time, increase falls, and leave a residue of confusion that the patient may not even connect to the pill. Some people do not notice the change because it comes gradually. Others notice it, but explain it away. They say, "I am just tired," or "I am under stress," or "that is old age." Again and again, the medicine is left out of the story. There is a reason for this. Anxiety itself can damage concentration. Poor sleep itself can make memory worse. Grief can make the mind feel fragmented. So, when a person under stress begins to forget things, the family and even the patient naturally blame the life situation. They say, "Well, she has had a hard year." And yes, that may be true. But a hard year plus a sedating pill every night is not the same as a hard year alone. The mature brain is not a simple machine. It reacts to the total load. A sedative can feel like relief while at the same time flattening the mind's natural alertness and making tomorrow's thinking slower. That is why an older person may sleep sooner but still wake as if wrapped in wet wool, not refreshed, not bright, not fully ready for the day. I remember a retired engineer, a very precise man, the kind who had once carried whole systems in his head. His wife brought him in because he had become absent-minded, unsteady, and oddly detached in conversation. Not wildly confused. That would have been easier to catch. No, this was subtler and therefore more dangerous. He would begin a sentence and lose its ending. He would put objects in the wrong place. He drove more slowly, then began avoiding unfamiliar roads. His wife said something I hear often. "He is here, but not fully." That phrase should trouble every family. He had been taking a benzodiazepine for years. It had started during a period of work stress long before retirement. Nobody had meaningfully reviewed it. It had simply stayed in the system of his life, month after month, prescription after prescription. When it was finally addressed carefully and tapered properly, not abruptly and not foolishly, his alertness improved. His wife later said, "He laughs faster now. He answers before I finish the question." Those small returns matter. They are signs of life returning to the surface. This is where mature viewers need discipline, because the trap is emotional as much as chemical. These medicines often become linked with safety. The person believes, "Without this, I will not sleep," or "Without this, I will fall apart." That belief can become stronger than the medicine itself. Then the tablet is no longer just a substance. It becomes a ritual of reassurance. But the brain pays a price for living under daily sedation. It loses sharpness, it learns dependence, it becomes less flexible. And in older age, the line between sedation and cognitive decline can become frighteningly thin. Research and clinical guidance have repeatedly warned that older adults are more sensitive to benzodiazepines, with increased risks of cognitive impairment, delirium, falls, fractures, and motor vehicle accidents. That is not exaggeration. That is accumulated medical experience turned into formal warning. There is another side to this that people rarely discuss openly. A sedative may not only affect memory, it may also shrink a person's courage. The world becomes something to get through rather than something to participate in. A person becomes more passive, less spontaneous, less willing to walk, travel, visit, read, engage. Family members may call this aging. Sometimes it is partly chemistry. When the brain is chronically softened by tranquilizers, initiative often falls. And initiative is not a luxury in later life. It is protection. It gets you out of the chair. It takes you outdoors. It makes you answer the phone, notice a mistake in a bill, remember to drink water, keep an appointment, challenge a bad prescription, remain the active author of your own life. When initiative drops, decline often accelerates. I have also seen the quiet damage done by so-called sleeping pills related to benzodiazepines. People think of them as modern, cleaner, milder. Some are indeed marketed in a way that sounds more elegant than older sedatives. Yet in older adults they too can affect balance, memory, nighttime confusion, and morning clarity. One woman told me, "I do fall asleep faster, but I wake with a blank place in my head." That is not a poetic sentence, it is a clinical clue. Another patient began eating at night and barely remembered it. A third stopped trusting himself on the stairs in the morning. These are not rare curiosities from medical journals. These are household consequences. As this becomes clearer, another category begins to emerge, one that people often treat almost casually because it is linked with pain. A person says, "It is only for my back," or "only after my surgery," or "only when the joints are bad." But pain medicines that act on the brain can change much more than pain. They can slow thinking, reduce alertness, and in some older people push the mind toward a frightening kind of confusion that families mistake for sudden dementia. And pain is where many families lose their clarity, because pain is real, exhausting, humiliating, and it wears down even a strong character. A person who lives with back pain, knee pain, hip pain, nerve pain, pain after surgery, pain after a fall, is not merely uncomfortable. Pain steals sleep, shortens patience, weakens movement, reduces appetite, and makes the whole world feel narrower. So when a stronger pain medicine is given, people are grateful. They should be. Relief matters. But this is exactly why I want you to look carefully at opioids and other brain-acting pain medicines in mature age. Because the same tablet that softens pain can also soften alertness, reaction, attention, and memory, sometimes so gradually that a family notices the change before the patient does. I am speaking here about medicines such as tramadol, codeine, oxycodone, hydrocodone, morphine, and similar drugs. These medicines can absolutely have a place, especially after operations, injuries, cancer pain, or severe pain that has not responded to safer options. I am not speaking against pain treatment, I am speaking against drift. against the casual extension of a strong brain-acting medicine far beyond the period when it is truly necessary, against the dangerous habit of saying it is only for the pain, as though the brain were not involved. The brain is always involved. Opioids act in the central nervous system, and in older adults they are associated with sedation, impaired cognition, dizziness, and falls. Guidance for older patients also warns that opioids can contribute to delirium, especially in the presence of frailty, poor sleep, polypharmacy, or illness. What makes this especially difficult is that pain itself can also cause confusion and decline. A person in severe pain sleeps badly, moves less, thinks less clearly, becomes irritable, and may look mentally older than they are. So, when an opioid is started, and the person later becomes foggy, it is not always easy to separate what came from the pain and what came from the medicine. That is why mature medicine requires observation, not assumptions. A patient may say, "I was bad before the tablet, and I am bad after it, so clearly the tablet is not the cause." Not so fast. Sometimes the medicine has reduced the pain but added a new burden to the mind. The older brain is often living under several pressures at once, and the total load is what determines whether a person remains clear or slips into confusion. I remember a man in his 70s after spinal surgery. Strong, dignified, deeply independent. He did what many older patients do. He focused on not complaining. He took his pain medicine, nodded politely, and said he was managing. But his wife saw something else. He was sleepy during the day, strangely vague in conversation, slower to answer, less safe on his feet, and at times he looked almost startled when asked a simple question. This is the sort of moment families describe by saying, "He is not himself." That phrase should always be taken seriously. He had been using tramadol more heavily than anyone realized, with another sedating medicine at night. Research has specifically found tramadol to be a risk factor for postoperative delirium in patients aged 75 and older after major surgery. That does not mean tramadol is uniquely evil. It means older bodies can react unpredictably and sometimes badly to medicines that act on the brain, especially when recovery, sleep disruption, and multiple prescriptions all come together. There is another trap here, and it is very common. Because pain medicines are seen as practical and physical, families often fail to connect them with memory changes. They will connect sleep pills with fog, they may connect tranquilizers with slowness, but they do not easily connect a pain tablet with a repeated question, a missed turn while driving, a forgotten kettle, a sudden loss of the thread in conversation. Yet opioids can absolutely reduce attention and speed of thinking. In some older people, they provoke frank delirium, a state of acute confusion with fluctuation, agitation, or drowsiness, and poor attention. Delirium is not the same as dementia, but it can look terrifyingly similar to families and can be a major turning point in a vulnerable brain. And here is where mature people need to hear something that may sound severe, but it is true. The goal in later life is not simply to reduce pain at any cost. The goal is to preserve function, to keep the mind clear enough to make decisions, to keep the body steady enough to walk safely, to allow sleep that restores rather than sedates, to leave enough mental light for reading, conversation, prayer, paperwork, memory, humor, dignity. A medicine that cuts the pain score while cutting away alertness and independence is not always a success. It may be a temporary compromise, sometimes a necessary one, but it must never become invisible. Older patients often stay on pain medicines longer than the original pain crisis lasts, simply because nobody re-examines the balance of benefit and harm. This is particularly dangerous with tramadol because many people think of it as somehow lighter or safer than stronger opioids. That assumption can be misleading. Tramadol has a complicated action in the brain, and in older adults it can bring not only sedation and dizziness, but confusion, interactions with antidepressants, and in some cases a greater delirium risk than people expect. Other opioids can cloud thinking as well, especially when dosed too aggressively, combined with benzodiazepines, combined with alcohol, or taken in the setting of dehydration, infection, constipation, low oxygen, or poor kidney function. In mature age, the context matters almost as much as the dose, and constipation, though people dislike talking about it, belongs in this conversation more than most realize. Opioids commonly slow the bowel. An older person becomes uncomfortable, eats less, drinks less, sleeps worse, strains more, feels heavier, more nauseated, more irritable, and less mentally clear. The family may never realize that the medicine is creating a second problem that then feeds confusion. The body is one connected system. You cannot cloud the gut, the sleep, and the blood flow, and expect the brain to remain untouched. I also want you to notice the emotional pattern. A mature patient in pain often fears losing autonomy. That fear makes them tolerate too much from a medicine because they are so relieved to feel less pain. They do not want to seem difficult. They do not want to ask for changes. They certainly do not want to sound ungrateful after surgery or during chronic illness. So they continue quietly while the mind gets slower, the balance gets worse, and the household begins adjusting around them. A chair is moved closer, driving is reduced, bills are double-checked, conversations become shorter. Everyone adapts, and no one names the chemical burden. This is why I insist on one practical exercise for the next 7 days if you are using a strong pain medicine. Each day, write down not only the pain level, but 3 other facts. First, how many times did you feel sleepy when you did not expect to? Second, how steady were you when standing up and turning? Third, did anyone need to repeat a question for you, or did you repeat yourself more than usual? This is not nitpicking. It is adult medicine. Pain relief should be judged alongside mental clarity and safe movement, not instead of them. And there is one more point I do not want you to miss. A person in pain should not be left to just suffer because we fear medicines. Untreated pain is also dangerous. It can increase delirium risk, especially after illness or surgery. The answer is balance. Use the lowest burden that truly helps. Consider non-drug methods seriously. Review the bowel. Review sleep. Review interactions. Review timing. Review whether the need is still present. Strong medicines require strong supervision, especially in a brain that has already lived many decades. Now, as this chain becomes clearer, another medication category steps out from the shadows. People rarely expect it, because these drugs are often used for stomach acid, nausea, or mood and behavior in very sick periods. Sometimes they enter the picture in hospital, sometimes in a nursing setting, sometimes after stress or agitation. But when they affect the mature brain badly, the change can be shocking. A person becomes slowed, blank, stiff in expression, restless inside, or suddenly disconnected from the world around them. Families call it decline. Very often it is chemistry speaking first. And now you can see why I have been so insistent from the very beginning. What looks like ordinary aging is not always ordinary aging. What families call rapid dementia is sometimes the brain crying out under a burden it should never have been forced to carry for so long. A tablet for sleep, a pill for allergies, something for the bladder, a stronger pain medicine, an older antidepressant, a calming drug taken long after the original crisis has passed. Each one may seem reasonable in isolation, and yet together they can slowly dim a person's memory, attention, balance, confidence, and sense of self. The tragedy is not only that this happens. The tragedy is that it happens quietly, respectfully, almost invisibly, while everyone tells themselves that this is simply what later life looks like. No, not always, and mature people deserve better than that kind of careless conclusion. I want you to hold on to one thought very firmly. The aging brain is not weak. It is sensitive. There is a difference. It has carried decades of work, grief, adaptation, responsibility, disappointments, recovery, endurance, and love. It has solved problems, remembered faces, endured losses, raised children, rebuilt routines, and learned how to survive. Such a brain deserves protection, not chemical clutter. When a mature person begins to lose sharpness, the first duty is not to surrender. The first duty is to investigate, calmly, thoroughly, honestly, what has changed, what was added, what is being taken every day, what is being taken only sometimes, but in reality has become frequent, what was started for a short season and then simply never stopped. These questions save dignity. Sometimes they save years. Over the years, I have seen families arrive in fear, already grieving a person who is still sitting in front of them. A wife whispering, "He is disappearing." A daughter trying not to cry because her mother has started repeating the same story 3 times in one afternoon. A son quietly taking over the bills because his father no longer seems certain with numbers. These are painful moments. And I have also seen the relief, the almost sacred relief, when a medication review begins to explain what seemed unexplainable. Not every case is reversible. I will never lie to you about that. Some people do have true neurodegenerative disease. Some memory loss is not caused by pills, and no serious doctor should pretend otherwise. But enough suffering is worsened by medicines, or accelerated by them, that no older adult should be labeled as just declining without a careful look at the medicine cabinet. That is why the most important point, the one many people do not know, is this. It is often not one dangerous medicine, but the total burden of several medicines acting on the same vulnerable brain. This is where intelligent adults protect themselves. Not with panic, not with internet fear, not by throwing tablets into the trash, but with disciplined review. One doctor may prescribe one medicine, another doctor adds another. A pharmacist dispenses them correctly. A family assumes that if each medicine is individually legal and familiar, then the combination must also be safe. But the brain does not live by paperwork. It lives by chemistry. It feels the cumulative weight. That is the hidden truth too few people are told. So now I want to gather everything in a way that feels practical, not frightening. The warning signs are often simple. A head that feels foggy in the morning. More dryness in the mouth. More constipation. More unsteadiness when standing. More repeated questions. A little less confidence behind the wheel. More trouble following a conversation in a noisy room. A sleep that knocks you out but does not restore you. A sense that the personality itself has gone quieter, flatter, less resilient. None of these signs should be mocked. None should be dismissed as vanity or oversensitivity. They are data. The body is speaking. The mature person who notices these details is not anxious. That person is wise. And now comes the bonus I want to leave with you, because this is where real strength begins. The first treatment for protecting memory is often not a new medicine at all. It is a clean review of the old ones. It is better timing, lower burden, fewer overlapping sedatives, more attention to sleep rhythm instead of sleep force, more daylight in the morning, more movement during the day, better hydration, honest treatment of constipation, respect for hearing and vision, because when people hear and see badly, the brain works harder and appears more confused. Conversation, reading aloud, walking, routine. These things sound modest, but do not underestimate them. The mature brain thrives on clean signals, rhythm, oxygen, blood flow, and meaningful engagement. It does not ask for miracles. It asks for conditions in which it can still do its work. Please remember something else as well. Never stop a long-used medicine abruptly without proper medical guidance, especially sleeping pills, calming medicines, antidepressants, opioids, or anything taken daily for a long time. Sudden changes can be dangerous. Wisdom is not recklessness. Wisdom is review, tapering when needed, replacing when appropriate, and choosing with respect for the whole person rather than one isolated symptom. That is medicine at its best. Not chasing complaints one by one, but protecting the life that holds them all together. If you want one serious action to take tomorrow, make it this. Put every medicine, prescription, and non-prescription on one table. Every sleep aid, every allergy tablet, every bladder medicine, every pain pill, every something for nerves, every old prescription that stayed in the routine because no one revisited it. Then ask for a proper medication review with one clear sentence. I want to know which of these may be affecting my memory, balance, or mental clarity. That sentence is powerful because it is specific. It invites real thinking. It tells the doctor, the pharmacist, and the family that you are not passively drifting into decline. You are protecting your mind. And I want you to hear this with complete seriousness and complete warmth. Growing older does not mean handing over your clarity without a fight. It does not mean accepting every new fog as fate. It does not mean mistaking sedation for peace or confusion for inevitability. There is still much that can be preserved. There is still much that can be improved. There is still time to protect what matters most: your ability to think, to choose, to remember, to recognize the faces you love, to speak with dignity, to remain present in your own life. That is why I ask you now, not lightly but sincerely, subscribe to this channel and like this video, because this information reaches people at the exact moment when they are about to give up and call it just age, and share it with someone who keeps saying, "I am probably just getting old." Sometimes that sentence hides a problem that can still be changed. Sometimes one careful conversation saves a family from months of fear. Sometimes one medication review gives a person back a clearer morning, steadier steps, and the feeling that they have returned to themselves. Take this seriously, but do not lose heart. Your time still has value. Your mind still deserves protection. And even now, one careful step can become the beginning of a much clearer life.